Jake in Kansas, how are you?
Good. How are you guys?
I'm fine,
Doing
thanks.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you, sir.
We said we're fine.
Oh, okay. So I heard you guys are positive atheists. So would you say your position on atheism is that you lack belief in God? Or that you believe
when we talk about
rely on
positive atheism on the show, often we just mean promoting atheism in a positive way, like a friendly social outreach kind of position.
All right.
The questions about positive and negative atheism, I realize that gets a little muddled up with the terms, but our position is nuanced. Let's just put it that way.
I define atheism as the absence of belief in a God, and the reason I do that is because otherwise you get into this shifting of the burden of proof. Prove that God doesn't exist, and I don't want to get into that, go down that rat hole. The people making the positive claim have the burden of proof, and until they can give me a good reason for the existence of God, then I just withhold belief.
Okay, so I think you just said you do not affirm or deny the existence of God, and that was your implication. So therefore, you wouldn't have the burden of proof. But I'm saying, let me ask: if an atheist is someone who has an absence of belief in God, then
Right.
How would you describe an agnostic?
Agnostic is a statement about what you know or what you claim to know, and atheist is a statement about what you believe. So they're two completely different questions.
Exactly. A theist would affirm the existence of God. An agnostic would neither affirm or deny the existence of God, and an atheist would deny the existence of God.
Well, an agnostic theist would affirm the existence, would believe that there is a God, but would say, I don't know it to be I don't know it for sure. An agnostic atheist would say, I don't believe in a God, and I don't know or claim to know that God exists. So you can be both, an agnostic and a theist, or you could be an agnostic atheist.
Well,
it's not a third thing.
Then. That leads to ambiguity then, because how do you guys define, what do you call someone who denies the existence of God?
Also an atheist. Because denying the existence of God denying the existence of God falls within the category of not believing in God.
Right. If you deny the existence of God, you also don't believe it. Some people call that an anti-theist. I don't like that term in particular.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the word atheist has been A in that word has been used to negate theos and not ism. So
sometimes.
It used to mean
let me give you a tip, Jake, because the last caller was an atheist who wanted to know sort of how to effectively communicate with atheists, with theists. And I just want to suggest that you seem like very concerned about nailing down exact meaning for labels. And I would suggest that you go with a more casual approach. And if you want to know what somebody believes specifically about God existing or not existing, drop the label atheist if you want to, and just ask them. I mean,
what do you believe, and why do you believe it?
Because a lot of arguments can get bogged down in, well, you use this word, and I think this word has one and only one definition, and it means exactly this. And by doing that, you're sort of trying to define what the other person believes for them. And I think that, in my experience, it leads to a lot more fulfilling conversations if you just say, okay, what do you believe? Can you explain it to me?
Uh-huh. Okay, so you guys say you neither affirm or deny the existence of God. Okay, so
I think we said exactly that, but I mean,
we'll
go with that.
So I guess the point of that definition is essentially to say that you have no burden of proof because you're neither affirming or denying the existence of God. Am I correct?
Well, I mean, let me put it this way. I don't know. Okay, so I always want to use a different metaphor than Santa Claus, but because I don't want to be insulting. But at the moment, I haven't got one off the top of my head. So, do you believe in Santa Claus?
No.
Okay. Do you know for sure that Santa Claus isn't hiding out somewhere?
Yes.
Really? How?
By means of modus tollens. It's a logical syllogism.
Tell me
If
how
even
you arrived at the certainty that there's no Santa Claus.
Well,
I mean, I know what modus tollens is. It's basically proof by
yeah,
contradiction, right?
Exactly. It's I'm incorporating logic.
Okay.
If Santa Claus existed, then there should be evidence that a man busted into a house every
No. Wait, I mean, you said if Santa Claus existed, then there would have to be evidence.
Argument.
Right. But, I mean, there are things that are just true that you don't have evidence for, right? I mean, I'm going to assume that you would agree with that.
Wait, for instance, I don't think I would agree with that. What do you mean by evidence?
So you know everything?
That's not what I said. You said there are some things that are true that you don't have evidence for. I'd say things that are true would have some evidence in reality. The fact that you wouldn't be aware of that evidence doesn't mean it's not true.
Okay, but you just categorically said there is definitely no evidence possible for Santa Claus, right?
Yes.
So you know everything there is to know
finish
possibly
my
about Santa Claus.
You didn't let me finish my argument. I was going to say if Santa Claus existed, it would necessarily follow that there would be there would be reports of parents saying, "Oh, these presents are in here. None of us bought them. Therefore, what do we do?" But that is not the case. Therefore, Santa Claus doesn't exist.
I think a lot of parents tell their kids that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
No, I said reports. So like they have calls.
Are you aware of the old newspaper editorial where some newspaper guy said, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus"?
Okay, then let me rephrase my argument to say the majority of people would have to say that.
I mean, I turn the weather report on Christmas Eve, and they have NORAD tracking Santa's sleigh across the sky. That's a report of Santa Claus.
Now, you understand, we're not trying to convince you.
That site is very aware that they are not being serious.
Well, you don't know that for sure about everybody. But, I mean, obviously, we're not trying to...
My argument is to say the majority of news stations or majority of reports would have to be in accordance with that. But that is not the case there for Santa Claus doesn't exist.
Right. Well, we're not trying to convince you that Santa Claus does exist, obviously.
Yeah, you're trying to say you can't prove the non-existence of something, which is simply false.
No, you can prove the non-existence of something, but I don't know that your argument that Santa Claus definitely doesn't exist holds up. There are things that don't exist that you can't prove don't exist. You know the black swan problem, for example?
Yeah, that was just a failed instance of induction.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wait, give me one moment.
Right. So, I mean... You know, if you've only ever encountered white swans and you say, "I know that black swans don't exist," that would be like an assumption that isn't supported by logic.
Yes, that would be a fallacy because the fact that you have not come into contact with a black swan doesn't necessitate that a black swan doesn't exist. So
when you're asking what atheists think, atheists generally, I mean, you know, somebody who would define themselves as an agnostic atheist would say, "I've got pretty solid confirmation that there isn't any God because there isn't any evidence," like you've been saying. But when backed against the wall, there is that tiny little corner where it could be that there's a black swan who just hasn't shown up yet. And all we're trying to do there is be reasonable.
But you said prove Santa Claus doesn't exist. But if he existed, then it would necessarily follow that the majority of reports would involve parents saying, "Hey, these presents are in our house and we didn't buy this." That would be a concern. If I was a parent, I'd say, "Wow."
The parents could be wrong.
Scared.
Maybe Santa Claus only chooses to show up to specific parents, and if he doesn't, then how do you know that you're just not one of the chosen ones? I mean, he's magic; he can hide from you.
Well, are you talking about the traditional Santa Claus story, or you're making your own just for the sake of the argument?
Could be that the traditional Santa Claus isn't absolutely right in all details.
Can you repeat that in here?
It could be that the traditional Santa Claus story almost got it right, but they missed some of the details.
For instance? What details?
I don't know. What do you find unconvincing about Santa Claus?
Well, you brought up the story of Santa Claus, and now you're trying to act as if that story is missing important aspects.
Well, that seems to be the way that the conversation goes whenever we try to nail down somebody's interpretation of religion. So I'm just trying to give as good as we get.
Okay.
Like, what do you believe about God? Can you specify exactly what kind of being God is?
Absolutely. God is an eternal, invariant, immaterial, universal, omniscient being that is personal and reveals himself.
Okay. Did he do all the things that the Bible says he did?
Yes.
Okay. So, for instance, I don't know, are you a young earther by any chance?
Absolutely.
You are?
Yes.
Okay. So, there are so many ways this conversation can go. I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time picking a path at the moment. I hope you understand. I mean, you understand that puts you at odds with the vast majority of scientists who specifically study the age of the Earth, right? I mean, I assume you're cool with that.
Well, that's logically irrelevant to whether or not it's true. There's been plenty of instances in the past in which the majority of scientists believe false things in regards to the Bible.
So the fact that scientists believed some false things means that anything you want to make up that they don't believe it must be true?
Now, you made the assertion somehow that it's unreasonable. Well, at least you implied that it's unreasonable.
But you do agree that this puts you at odds with science in general right now?
And that would be expected if the biblical world.
Okay. So you don't accept observation and testing and scientific consensus as the way to reach evidence about something.
Wait, repeat that whole statement?
I mean, how do you come to conclusions about what's true?
Well, in regards to everyday things, observation, testing, in regards to things about the past, usually make reference to the Bible.
Okay, so is it reasonable to observe that no God appears to have shown up despite all this time that we've been doing a show talking about him? Like,
why would that be expected if Christianity is true?
I'm not saying it necessarily has to be expected. I'm just asking, given this lack of evidence, can you see how it would be reasonable for me to conclude there's no God?
The problem is your worldview determines what you view as evidence.
Okay.
If you believe everything is made out of matter,
does your worldview determine whether you believe in the sun or not?
Yes, because there's Hindus who believe that the world's an illusion.
Okay. So they don't believe in observation and testing.
Well, that's what they profess. Obviously, their day-to-day life, they don't live like that.
I don't know enough about Hinduism to know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure that there are large portions of society that dismiss the idea that the sun exists.
But for instance, the Hindu will say matter doesn't exist, all is illusion, and then look both ways before they cross the street. So that's a contradiction. They're arbitrary.
Sure, I agree with that.
And I would say also atheism is an incoherent religion worldview.
Okay, so what is the evidence that we should expect to see that would convince us that a God exists?
The evidence of God, the God of the Bible, is that without God, you cannot know anything. So we know things.
I deny that. I know stuff, and I don't think there's a God. So convince me that what you just said is accurate.
Or what convinces you?
Well, proof and persuasion are distinct things. You must acknowledge that distinction because you can be persuaded of something that is not proof, and someone could logically demonstrate something to you that you would not be persuaded of.
Right, but I assume you're calling an atheist show for the purpose of persuading people that you're right. So what you got?
Okay, so for instance, in order to have knowledge, it must be the case that you have a reason to believe that the future will be like the past. Because, for instance, what reason do you have to believe that the future state of affairs will be like the past state of affairs if atheism is true?
Well, that thing you just said about still looking both ways before you cross the street.
Mm-hmm. Wait, repeat that?
A few minutes ago, you were talking about, well, it would be ridiculous and contradictory for Hindus not to believe in matter, but still look both ways before they cross the street. Like, looking both ways before you cross the street and is, in some sense, a practical judgment based on the observation that the future has tended to be like the past so far.
Well, that's begging the question. You're essentially saying we believe the future is going to be like the past because it has in the past. That is assuming induction. Because let me give you an example. Say I asked you, what reason do you have to believe that your past experience of when you put your feet before your other foot, one of your foot before your other feet, you know what I mean? I misspoke. But you move forward, right? In the past, you take steps and you move forward.
Right.
So then the reason that you believe that was going to happen in the future is because you believe the future will be like the past. And
all right. So the ability to make predictions on something.
Because every time I've done that before, it's happened, so I don't have any reason to...
Yeah, but you didn't let me finish speaking. I was going to explain why that's a fallacy.
Okay.
Because induction is the principle that you can take past experience and extrapolate that into the future. And the reason why we can take past experience and extrapolate that into the future, the reason is because the future will be like the past. So then you say induction because of uniformity. Then I ask you, why do you believe in uniformity? Why do you believe the future will be like the past? And you say, because of induction. You appeal to the past. So you're saying A because of B,
okay.
B because of A.
Can we cut to your solution about how you arrive at induction?
God has revealed that he upholds the world in a law-like fashion in this word.
Okay. What is your reason for God existing?
Because without God, you couldn't have knowledge, since knowledge is a...
Okay, but what does it take? What does it take for God to exist?
God is self-existent. God is necessary.
Oh, okay. So not all things need reasons for them. Some things are the way they are.
That wasn't the question you asked. The reason you believe in God, the reason I believe in God is that without God, you cannot have a reason to believe in anything.
Okay. What is the reason that God exists? That's what I actually asked.
You asked an epistemological question, then you asked an metaphysical.
Oh, so you can ask all the epistemological questions, but I can't.
No, you changed the question. You equivocated on the question the second time you asked it.
Okay. No, I said the first time, what is your reason that God exists?
Well, what kind of question even is that? What do you mean?
I don't know. What kind of a question is, what is your reason that induction works?
Because that's a valid question. If you believe that something is the case, you must have a reason for it.
Okay, so you believe that God is the case, you must have a reason for it.
Now, that's a valid question. You asked, the question you asked previous was, why does God exist? It's kind of like a malformed question. I couldn't tell if that
I thought it was the same question, but go ahead.
Okay. My reason for believing God exists is because without God, you couldn't have knowledge.
How do you know that?
This is super circular. I hope you understand that.
It's very circular.
Well, every worldview ultimately is circular.
I mean, here, I'm going to go you one better. Induction must exist because without induction, God couldn't exist.
I don't know what kind of illogical argument that was.
The same kind of illogical argument you're trying to throw at me, just flipped in reverse. Like, God, God is just this word you're using to say, hey, the logical problems that I think you have are magically solved because Fleet Glorp exists.
Well, let me address your statement about circular reasoning. Let me ask you a question. One of the fundamental principles in Christianity is that we know everything ultimately is justified by God's revelation. Now, if that is true, let me ask you, how would we know that?
How would we know that God exists?
That wasn't my question. Can you ask mine, and then can you answer mine, and I'll answer yours?
No, because you keep trying to pull this same thing where you're saying that your magic concept dodges around every possible philosophical question, and I'm asking how you justify the God existing under this framework that you yourself are giving me.
What do you mean by justify the God existing? Justify my reason for believing that?
Right. Well, no. I mean, you're asking me to justify that logic works, basically, right?
No, I didn't bring up logic. I brought up induction and uniformity of nature.
So, but your question was, why does logic work? I thought earlier.
I didn't say anything about logic.
Okay.
Okay, so essentially, the claim about circular reasoning I address in this manner. If everything we know ultimately is known through God's revelation, then even that would have to be known through God's revelation. So your claim of circular reasoning is irrelevant. It's simply me having a consistent worldview.
Oh, so what you're saying is circular reasoning is actually a good logic.
No, there's instances in which circular reasoning is fallacious, correct?
Okay, but
when you just say, when it's arbitrary, you have no reason for
right.
saying it's like saying A because of A. You can prove anything in that manner. That's why it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
But you cannot prove anything in the manner that I'm using this argument. Saying without God, you can't have a reason to believe anything.
With God, you can have a reason to believe anything. I mean, okay, so what you're asking me to accept is that your assumption, which you can't justify, is true because everything else relies on it, which you also can't justify.
Well, I would say it's justified. So that
of course you would say it's justified. You're saying it over and over again.
It sounds to me like you're just saying things are the way they are because of God's revelation. You're just.
I would say if you deny God's revelation, you're denying reality, and that shows up in the fact that.
Okay, but I just told you I'm not denying reality, so you haven't justified that.
Well,
why is God's revelation necessary in order for reality to exist?
Because God has made reality in such a way that you cannot make sense of it without it.
No. You see, again, you're basing this on the assumption that God exists.
Well, the assumption is something that's unjustified, and I have a justified belief.
Okay, what is the justification besides just repeating it over and over again?
We'll go through this the sixth time. Without God, you have no reason to believe anything, and therefore you cannot know anything because knowledge.
You make that claim, but you don't justify it.
And then I explained to you how that is.
We've been on this call for a good, at least 20 minutes, and I think we're going to move on pretty soon. Do you want to wrap up in some way?
Sure.
Okay.
My argument wasn't refuted, and you understood how you had a problem.
You didn't make an argument. You just kept saying the same thing, and we didn't accept your premise. So that's the way it went.
The fact that you didn't accept it is irrelevant.
Okay.
I just totally disagree that you say without God you have no reason to believe anything, and I just flat out disagree with that.
Right.
Well, and you haven't justified why that's necessary. You haven't justified why that's necessary. Why is God necessary?
I have a consistent worldview.
So you're saying God is necessary because you think God is necessary?
No, because He's revealed that He's necessary. Once again, I justify that.
Well, that's only because you.
Okay. Nice talking to you.
Yike! I mean, God's necessary because God says He's necessary.